Remember when you could buy economy cars? The days of being able to buy pure basic transportation are long gone. Back in the 70s and 80s, however, brands like Toyota and Honda were making a name for themselves, selling reliable, economic, basic transportation. One of the earliest examples of this was the Toyota Corolla, at that time a front-engined rear-wheel drive car, which started being exported to North America back in 1968. By the late 70s, the Corolla was steadily gaining popularity and was about to enter its fourth generation. But thanks in part to the 70s oil crisis, the basic transportation class was becoming more and more competitive, and within it, a new trend was emerging, a little thing called front-wheel drive. So here's the dilemma. Should Toyota jump on the front-drive bandwagon with their new Corolla, or should they not fix what isn't yet broken? Yes, Toyota decided to do both. And when the 4th-gen Corolla hit showrooms in late 1979, it remained front-engined rear-wheel drive, but brought with it a new sidekick. The Toyota Corolla Tercel, slightly smaller than a traditional Corolla and positioned as an even more stripped-down economy car, the Tercel tried something totally new for Toyota. It pulled instead of pushed. So meet the 1980 Toyota Corolla Tercel, Toyota's first front-drive car. It would last for 5 generations, and I'll pull you through all of them today. So sit back and let's remember why it was oh what a feeling to drive a Toyota.
A car that pulls its own weight.
And a little bit more.
Oh, what a feeling.
Tercel.
Toyota.
The first generation Tercel was really considered to be a submodel of the Corolla. If you opened up a Corolla brochure in 1980, next to the already long list of Corolla models, you would find 4 new Corolla Tercel models. 2 sedan trim levels and 2 hatchback models. The Tercel really is more than just a Corolla trim, however. It has its own styling, uses a different engine, sends the power to different wheels, and even has differing dimensions. Both body styles are about 8 inches shorter than their Corolla counterparts, and they're a few inches narrower as well. Despite being shorter overall, the Tercel actually has a longer wheelbase by about 4 inches. But when you look at the Tercel, that kinda makes sense, because you can see it has very short front and rear overhangs. Now, exterior styling is just about as 1980 standard as you can get. How many cars can you think of from this era that look like this? You've got a grille, standardized square headlights, turn signals in the bumper, and side markers on the fender. The sedan rear end follows the 1980 compact car dress code pretty closely as well. The hatchback, or I guess this would probably be considered a liftback, does have a little bit more of a unique look. Whether or not it's an attractive look is perhaps open to interpretation, but the sloped glass opens up to give access to the cargo area. It does have to lose a few practicality points versus some of its competition here, like the Civic for example, since the glass is the only part that opens. The body around it is fixed. This makes loading large cargo a bit more of a pain, since everything would have to be lifted over the back of the car and almost dropped in from above. Take a look at this Tercel nameplate though, it's kinda neat. The letter T is actually a falcon, which ties into the Tercel name. The name Tercel is derived from the word Tercel, which is the term for a male falcon. In Latin, this word means 1/3 because a male falcon is 1/3 smaller than a female. Now the Tercel is not 1/3 smaller than a Corolla, of course, but it is smaller, so we can see where the naming inspiration is coming from. You just don't see little design details like this anymore, especially not in an economy car. This little falcon also makes an appearance on the steering wheel and in the gauge cluster. Now I realize in the gauges he's really just hiding a blank, but you know, I still appreciate the effort. It looks better than if they had just left nothing there, which is exactly what would have happened had this car been made 10 or 15 years later. So let's talk about the interior. It's actually fairly roomy for a vehicle of this size, and that goes back to the longer wheelbase I mentioned. Pushing the wheels out to the far edges of the car mean rear passengers don't have any wheel well intrusion, and according to the brochure at least, the Tercel has more front legroom than any other front-wheel drive vehicle in production at that time. And by the way, these seats are amazing. Plaid that is color matched to the exterior, I love it. Now what was Toyota using to power this little Tercel? Well, in North America, it's the 1AC, a carbureted 1.5 liter rated at 60 horsepower. With a 0 to 60 time of over 16 seconds and a top speed of 85 miles per hour, you weren't going to win any races, that's for sure, but again, this was just supposed to be basic transportation. Despite this vehicle being basic transportation, Toyota seemed to like to jump it a lot in their commercials. I guess maybe because the car was so light, and I don't know. I imagine you'd need a pretty long runway, that's for sure. Don't try this at home. How nice of Shannon to finally let all her neighbors park on her street. Though I'm not sure why she insisted we park this direction. Hey, does anyone know what that ramp is there for? Now, the keen observer probably noticed something about this engine while I was talking. You see, I already told you that the Tercel is front-wheel drive, but this engine is still longitudinally mounted. Usually front-drive cars have transverse-mounted engine and transmissions, but here we see that Toyota has decided not to conform to that, and instead the engine sits a touch higher than usual, and a differential is mounted underneath the number 4 cylinder. Power goes into the top of the transmission, which then turns it around and spits it back out below. Sound familiar? And while Toyota claimed this was done for serviceability, I think they did this so the Tercel could share more parts with the Corolla and other Toyota models, reducing production costs. Trims for the Tercel were your base 2-door, the 2-door Deluxe, the Deluxe Liftback, and the SR5 Liftback, which would be your highest trim. All models came standard with a 5-speed manual, except the base sedan, which came with a 4-speed. A 3-speed auto was optional on the base sedan or Deluxe Liftback. Brakes were front disc rear drum, and standard features included reclining bucket seats and a locking fuel door. Full carpeting, a low fuel light, an electric rear window defroster, and side moldings were also standard on all trims except the base sedan, which was really positioned as the bare bones model. Air conditioning was available as an option on all models except the base sedan, and the AM/FM radio was standard only on the SR5 Liftback, but was an option to all models except again that very basic 2-door sedan. Both hatch models have rear seats that can fold down. SR5 hatches also get trim rings on the steel wheels, a cargo light, a different 3-spoke steering wheel, and a unique gauge cluster with a tack. SR5 models also get these cool side graphics, which feature the Falcon.
Welcome.
A rear windshield wiper could also be added as an option on both liftback models. Power steering was not available. For 1981, the Corolla Tercel gets updated. It may seem premature after just 1 year, but remember that the Tercel had been in production since 1978 in Japan. The biggest cosmetic change is to the front end, which now sees the side marker lights integrated into the front fascia, similar to how they already were on the regular Corolla, though the shape of them is a little bit different. The trim rings for the steel wheels are now optional to all models, and alloy wheels has been added as an option to the SR5. On the back, differences are much more subtle, but on the hatch you can see that the taillights are now divided into sections with chrome trim. Inside, the plaid seat pattern is gone, and all models except the SR5 now have vinyl covered seats instead of cloth. The base gauge cluster is now 2 round dials with vertical rows of indicator lights on either side, with no Falcon in sight.
A tachometer and a few other gauges would be appreciated.
The SR5 cluster is updated with cross hatches. I'm not sure why, but Toyota seemed to be putting this in all their gauge clusters around this time. Fuel and temp gauges on it are now square instead of round. 1981 also adds a 4-door sedan model to the Tercel lineup. Option-wise, it's a little bit better equipped than the base 2-door, with the 5-speed transmission over the 4-speed and AC available as an option, but the rear window defogger is still optional. Unlike 2-door sedans, the rear seats on the 4-door do fold down. Optional on all models now is an 8-track or a cassette player, and both liftback models can now be optioned with a sunroof. The engine is updated to the 3AC, which ditches Toyota's TGB combustion system and instead uses a catalytic converter to meet emission standards. It manages to squeeze out an extra 2 horsepower. For the final 82 model year, SR5 models get a passenger side mirror, and there's a new black option package available to that model, which includes gloss black paint, alloy wheels, air conditioning, and a simulated leather steering wheel. Now, the first generation Tercel may not have been anything fancy, but it got you from point A to B, reliably. The first gen Tercel was basic transportation in its purest form, but Toyota was here to show us that basic doesn't necessarily have to come with as many compromises as you might have thought. For 1983, the Tercel ditches the Corolla safety net and now stands on its own 4 wheels as an independent model. In North America, there's no sedan for this generation, but the Tercel can be enjoyed in 3 or 5-door liftbacks or a 4-wheel drive wagon, but we'll talk about the wagon in a minute. Within the liftback models, there are 3 trims. Your base liftback, which comes 3-door only and is the basic transportation model, equipped with a 4-speed manual, no radio, and rear defroster as an option. The deluxe trim is available in 3 or 5-door body styles, comes with the 5-speed manual transmission, and the 3-speed auto is an option. The rear defroster is standard, but radio is optional, as is cloth seats, air conditioning, power steering, a rear window wiper, and a power sunroof. 5-door liftbacks get a cargo light and a cargo cover as standard, but you can add those options to the deluxe 3-door as well. The top liftback trim remains the SR5, and it gets a gauge cluster with a tach, a digital clock, a standard radio, cloth seats, driver's seat height adjustment, a passenger side mirror, and optional alloy wheels. A rear wiper is optional on all liftback models. The SR5 does get badging on the side again, but it's not as fun as last year. The 3A engine remains at 62 horsepower and 76 pound-feet of torque on all models except the basic transportation model, which, like last year's base 2-door, still uses the 60 horsepower engine. The new styling has a more mid-80s look to it, with less chrome and more black plastic. The back end is pretty different though. There's new square taillights, and it's now got a proper tailgate that opens like a normal hatch. Styling definitely falls into the basic transportation category, but there is some nice attention to detail. Look at this rear wheel arch. Notice how the top of the arch doesn't follow the rear wheel back down, but instead flows straight back around and under the taillights, now serving as sort of a lower frame for them to sit on. A design element that really wasn't necessary on a car like this, but they did it anyway, and even if you don't consciously notice it, it still makes it look better. Inside, efficiency remains the theme, and the Tercel continues to be very spacious for such a small car. The base and deluxe models get this cluster, much more basic, and disappointingly, the blank no longer has a Falcon. Starting in 1985, you could get an optional analog clock on deluxe models, which would populate this blank. One really funny thing about this cluster is all the squares. It's so 80s. A few of the indicator lights seem almost randomly mixed among them. I can't help but imagine clicking on the squares in this cluster to attempt to uncover more lights or gauges. Is this a gauge cluster or a game of Minesweeper? Hey, there's the clock. All right, I'm gonna look for an oil pressure gauge. Oh.
Hey, what's a nice family like the Vengroves doing in a place like this?
We're going on vacation.
The 4-wheel drive Toyota Tercel wagon is on the move again. Destination? Fun. Cause this Tercel switches from front wheel to 4-wheel drive on command.
There it is!
Wow. And gives the best gas mileage of any 4-wheel drive car.
Alright, now we're gonna look at the real exciting news for the second gen Tercel. The wagon model. And not just any wagon model, a 4-wheel drive wagon. It is perhaps a little surprising that a basic transportation economy car would spawn a 4-wheel drive wagon, but Toyota was able to make this happen with minimal development costs, using mostly existing parts from Toyota's inventory and taking advantage of the longitudinal engine setup. The wagon model uses the same engine as the other Tercel models, and then uses the drive shaft and rear end from the rear drive Corolla. They did develop a new combined transmission and transfer case assembly for this model. It came manual only and was actually a 6-speed, 5 normal gears and then an EL gear, which stands for extra low, available only when in 4-wheel drive mode. Designed to deliver the low speed torque needed to get this little wagon through conditions that no one would have ever thought a Tercel could thrive in. One neat thing about this system is you can shift into 4-wheel drive on the fly without stopping, but you do need to be careful not to use 4-wheel drive during normal driving. There's no high range gear or conventional high-low transfer case, so using 4-wheel drive on dry pavement will result in premature drivetrain wear and compromised handling. The wagon, though it has the same wheelbase, is a little longer than the other Tercel models and taller as well, with 2 more inches of headroom. The exterior styling is actually quite different, especially the back, with these long, tall taillights and a rather curious license plate holder, which also contains a singular large reverse light placed off-center in the tailgate. The front end has its own grille and extra lights to the inside of the headlights that are not present on other Tercel models. It looks like they're just extra running lights. I think this would have been cooler if they'd made these like fog lights or something a bit more functional though. Wagons came in 2 trim levels, Deluxe and SR5. SR5 models get the gauge cluster with a tach, as well as these inclinometers mounted atop the dash, which also have a little display that illuminates to let you know when you're in 4-wheel drive. SR5 models get cloth sport seats, and I can see they've brought back some fun plaid patterns. Optional to SR5 wagons is alloy wheels, power steering, AC, a cassette player, and 2-toned paint. Dual mirrors, a cargo light, and a cargo cover are standard on both models, and a rear wiper and under the chassis gravel shields were optional. This little wagon, despite not having a ton of ground clearance or much power, is surprisingly capable, and unlike anything made today, was really built to last. I'm not kidding. Check out this 85 model that this guy from Nova Scotia has driven for over 1.2 million kilometers and counting.
Right? Campbell bought the car in Halifax for $2,500 around 1990. Over the years, he stashed away enough spare parts to try to keep it going for $1 million more.
That car is for me to use. If I got to get up in a snowstorm and go to Halifax or Elmsdale. Would you like to see my new car? This is my new one. 86.
This guy is an absolute legend. In 1984, Toyota added a front drive only wagon to the lineup, a useful addition for people that wanted the practicality of the wagon model, but lived in a climate where the four-wheel drive would get limited, if any, use. These wagons came standard with the 5-speed manual, and the 3-speed auto was available to them as an option. There's a few things that happened for 1985. Liftback models get new taillights, a new grille, and both models get slightly tweaked center vents and climate controls. It looks like they added a function to close off the vents, and the icons for the vent settings are different. The inclinometer pod is deleted, which is too bad. I thought it was cool, although Motor Week pointed out its limited usability since it was only accurate at a complete stop. Hey, you know what you could have put here instead? Another change for wagons was the four-wheel drive deluxe wagon was now automatic only. And loses the extra low gear. Only SR5 wagons retain the 6-speed. On liftback models, the SR5 trim was eliminated altogether, and there's now a convenience group option package available to deluxe liftbacks, which would add upgraded headlights, cloth seats, the analog clock, a passenger side view mirror, intermittent wipers, a locking cargo cover, and a tilt steering wheel. 1986 was the final model year, and I think this generation was a special one. The four-wheel drive wagon is super cool, and it even prompted Honda to make their own version of an economy wagon turned four-wheel drive, which came out in '85. And the little economy liftbacks were great cars too. Cheap, easy to service, and surprisingly versatile. They basically last forever if you can stop them from rusting out. I realize that's a tall order, but if this guy can keep the rust at bay in Nova Scotia, you can too. Building indestructible small cars and trucks is what Toyota did best in the 80s, and this little Tercel is one fine example of that.
Oh, what a feeling.
Tercel.
Toyota.
Before we get into the new, let's first address the old, the wagon, because it actually carries over into 1987 on the second-gen platform. They've updated the front end with a new grille, side markers, and flush mount headlights, but other than that, the wagon carries over mostly unchanged. It's still available in a front-wheel drive deluxe model and deluxe or SR5 trims for the four-wheel drive model. The engine, transmission, and for the most parts the options remain the same as last year. The wagon would actually carry over to the first part of '88 as well before being replaced by the Corolla-based wagon. Hatchbacks, on the other hand, have been completely redesigned. For '87, the trims and body styles are pretty much the same as last year, with the base 3-door model and then 3 or 5-door deluxe models. They have more modern, rounded styling, well, modern from a late 80s perspective at least, and have large windows that give it a very open feel and excellent vision. Inside of the new hatch is still pretty basic. There have been little cup holders added that slide out from under the climate controls, which are still sliders, although you won't be fitting much other than cans in them. The rear seat back folds down as one piece unless you get the convenience package, which then gives it a 50-50 split. This package also gives you a remote hatch and fuel door release, as well as most of the other same items that this package contained last year. The sunroof option is now a manual sunroof and available only to the deluxe 3-door. A rear defroster is still not standard on the 3-door base, and a radio still isn't standard on any of the hatches. The new gauge cluster loses the Minesweeper look, but remains very basic and honestly now just kind of looks like the cluster we had back in 1981. The center blank could be populated by an optional analog clock, which for '87 comes in the convenience package. I can't believe Toyota actually has the audacity to call this full instrumentation in their brochure.
Why isn't there a tachometer on a car that's just gotten such a big boost in performance?
Cloth seats and a rear wiper remain options on all models, and power steering and AC is optional on deluxe models. Changes continue under the hood. There's a new 12-valve engine, which puts out 78 horsepower and 87 pound-feet of torque. This is really the first significant power upgrade we've seen on the Tercel. It's about time. All right, more power. That's what I'm talking about. All right, get ready. Lights turning green. Let's see what this Tercel can do.
Welcome back.
You may have also noticed that Toyota has finally decided to conform to the front-wheel drive norm of mounting the powertrain transversely. This allowed Toyota to shorten the hood of the Tercel a bit, and by the late 80s I don't think there was much of a stigma towards sideways engines in a car like this anymore. Front-wheel drive was quickly becoming the standard for economy cars by this point. Transmission options were 5-speed manual on the Deluxe 3-door with 3-speed as an option. The base 3-door is still 4-speed only, and the 5-door was exclusively auto. For 1988, there are a few new Tercel models. The 2-door is back, available in base or deluxe trims, and there's also now what Toyota calls an easy liftback model, a 3-door placed below the already very basic 3-door base model.
It's so easy to own Tercel. It's so easy.
The easiest way to spot the easy liftback is by the headlights, because this model uses the old school square standardized headlights instead of the new flush mount ones. It comes 4-speed manual only, and all the other models now come standard with the 5-speed or can be optioned to the auto. The 2 and 3-door standard trims now have most of the options available to them that they previously couldn't get, like power steering and AC, and this easy liftback has taken the basic transportation role as Toyota's lowest price car. The easy liftback doesn't even have full carpeting in the trunk, a center console, cup holders, or a cigarette lighter. The convenience option package is now split into 2 versions, one for deluxe models, 2, 3, or 5-door, which includes a tilt steering wheel, low fuel light, remote fuel door and trunk release, and a center console, and one for standard models, which includes cloth seats, the tilt steering wheel, and the remote trunk and fuel door release. You may not add such luxuries to your easy liftback, peasant. The 50/50 folding seats are now standalone options on the deluxe liftback models. Not too much has changed for 1989, but Toyota did add a standard trim model to the 5-door, which remember was previously available in deluxe only. Deluxe models, by the way, are designated by DX badging on the trunk. So now you can get 2, 3, or 5-door models in standard or deluxe trim, and then there's still the easy liftback 3-door, aka basic transportation. Now Toyota does also add a few more things to the easy liftback model for 1989. AC and the clock have been added as available options, and the cigarette lighter has been made standard. Not surprised about that one. I was thinking when I read that the 88 Easy model didn't have a cigarette lighter, that would have been a pretty significant deterrent for a lot of buyers back then. I know they didn't have phones to charge, but I'm pretty sure in the late 80s, cigarette lighters were still frequently being used for their intended purpose. As a matter of fact, an illuminated cigarette lighter was now included in the deluxe convenience package. Model and option selection is cut down significantly for the final 1990 model year, with no deluxe liftback and no 5-door version at all. There are only 2 and 3-door standard models, a deluxe 2-door, or the 3-door easy model. The rear window defogger option has been removed not only from the easy liftback, but also the standard 2-door coupe, which is kind of crazy to me. On most cars it was standard by then. Not having a rear window defroster in 1990 is kind of wild. I sometimes wonder if when you see model and option deletions like this in the final model year of a generation, if it's because the manufacturer is getting ready for the next gen and is either clearing out a bunch of already built models or is in the process of resetting up their production lines and they're just trying to blast out the last year as cheaply as possible. Also for 1990, the remote trunk and fuel door release becomes standard on both coupe models. The convenience package now includes full wheel covers, dual side view mirrors, the 50/50 folding seats, the remote fuel and trunk door release, intermittent wipers, and the analog clock, but it's only available to the standard 3-door. Here's another strange thing about 1990. In California only, all 1990 Tercels were sold with a fuel-injected engine. I'm assuming because the carbureted one didn't meet some sort of new emissions requirement. The fuel-injected version only has a very slight power increase, 82 horsepower and 89 pound-feet of torque. This generation was once again all about basic transportation, and despite the questionable option availability for 1990, I think this generation does that very well. This generation of Tercel, especially the hatches, are super practical and their cost of ownership is very low. And occasionally, like I said, I still see one of these on the road today, a testament to their build quality, and that's pretty impressive for Toyota's lowest price model. It's 1991. Are you buying a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis? Why choose? If you drive a Tercel, maybe you can afford both. The Tercel enters the 90s the same way most cars do, with more rounded edges. The new Tercel's styling is not likely to turn many heads, but it looks just fine, and the Tercel isn't about showing off or being flashy, it's about value. So let's see what kind of value the Tercel gets you in 1991. The engine is now the fuel-injected 3E that California models had last year. It's no powerhouse, but it is bulletproof. And remember, a Tercel on the road still beats any exotic on the back of a tow truck. One thing that is a little disappointing is although a hatch exists for this generation in other markets, Toyota decided not to offer that one to us. What we did get is a 2-door basic transportation model, 2 or 4-door deluxe models, and a 4-door LE model positioned as the top trim. Basic transportation models again use the standardized headlights and have black bumpers and steel wheels. They also still come exclusively with a 4-speed, do not have power steering, and a passenger side mirror is a dealer installed accessory. Seats on the base are vinyl, and AC is optional across all models. Moving up to the deluxe, available in 2 or 4 doors, and the transmission is now a 5-speed or that optional 3-speed automatic. You now have cloth seats and power steering is available as an option. Headlights are flush mounted, but bumpers are still black, unless you order the exterior appearance package, which gives you color matched bumpers and black body side moldings. A passenger side mirror is standard. For some reason, hubcaps are standard on the 2-door DX, but remain a dealer accessory on the 4-door. Cassette players or CD players are dealer installed options across all trims. The convenience package is still available to DX models, and if you want such luxuries as 60/40 folding seats, the remote trunk and fuel release, intermittent wipers, and a digital clock that looks like someone just glued to the top of the dashboard, you will have to get said package. The top LE trim gives you everything in the convenience and appearance packages as standard, as well as dual mirrors, full hubcaps, front door map pockets, cup holders, and rear door child locks. These models can easily be spotted by the full-length faux tail light bar exclusive to the LE. You could get an optional tack on the LE which will give you this gauge cluster, however it still will not satisfy everyone.
We only wish there were more of them.
The standard cluster is this one, another 2-dial design very similar to last year. The interior has said goodbye to right angles since it's the 90s now, and everything has to be more round. Even the climate vents are round. A very mild refresh comes for 93, but the only real cosmetic difference is a new grille. Inside, a driver's airbag is now standard across all models. Body-colored bumpers are now standard on the DX. Not much else is new for 93, but in the convenience package they've added something called full trunk trim, which I'm assuming means interior trunk trim or maybe carpeting. I can't find any trunk pictures of this generation, so I can't say for sure. They've also added ABS as an available options to all the models for 93. A remote control Toyota security system can be added as a dealer installed option. In 1994, Toyota once again does some weird, seemingly cost-cutting moves for the final model year of this generation. The LE model is dropped. The cup holders and the child locks on the 4-door are the only LE things that get passed down to the DX. The standard rear window defroster does not, and that and all of the other LE stuff is now either optional or in the convenience package. But on the DX, they take away the standard body-colored bumpers and bring back the appearance package with them in it. So you gave us standard body-colored bumpers for 1 year and then took it away? Come on, Toyota, no take-backsies. Once again, the last model year for this generation seems to be the worst one. I guess I'll take a 93. Judging by the commercials and the print marketing I found, it seems like Toyota really marketed this generation towards younger people, like first-time car buyers, and that really is what this car would be perfect for. Who says a Tercel isn't cool? Nowadays, when I see one of these on the road, they seem to be driven by seniors, usually older ladies, many of them who have probably had them since new, and these cars are perfect for them too. Simple, basic transportation that is drama-free and cheap to maintain. Oh, Toyota, I love what you do for me, except when you take away things that were standard and add them back as options. That's lame. The year is 1995, and Tercel models there are 3. The DX, 4-door, 2-door, and the 2-door base. You know the drill by now. The base is a 4-speed manual. The DX is a 5-speed or the optional auto, which is now a 4-speed. There is an automatic option available to the base now, but for that one you'll get the 3-speed. Power steering remains optional to the DX models, and ABS and AC can be added to all the models. Body-colored bumpers remain optional as well. Do we have a standard rear defroster yet? No! I guess they want you to buy this all-weather guard package. A passenger airbag is now standard though, and so are map pockets. A radio still isn't, but there are a number of audio systems available. You can go all the way up to a dealer-installed 6-disc CD changer if you want. The convenience package is the same as last year, and there's now a power package available just to the 4-door DX, which gives you power windows and locks. We do have an upgraded engine. It's got 2 overhead cams now, and makes 93 horsepower and 100 pound-feet of torque. Exterior styling is not too drastically different. The front end looks pretty similar actually, but the rear gets new taillights and has a pretty different look to it. It doesn't look bad, but it's just basic transportation, and we all know it hasn't looked as cool since they ditched the Falcon.
Welcome.
The interior is not too different from last year. The climate controls are nearly exactly the same. The digital clock is integrated a little bit better. We now have this new gauge cluster, which remains very basic.
Continuing absence of a tachometer in even DX grade cars.
If you're wondering about the different colored gauge needles, it seems like they were only orange for 1995. They had to cost cut out that orange paint, I guess. For 1996, Birds of Prey are back! Meet the 1996 Blackhawk Edition, a limited edition Tercel, which for 96 they apparently only made 4,000 of. Alright, I hear your comments. Does the term Tercel refer to both Hawks and Falcons, or was I wrong to call this a Falcon earlier? By the definition I looked up, it kinda just seemed like the term applied to both, but I probably just didn't understand what I read. Look, I'm not a bird expert, and if you are, well, you probably already left the video in disgust back in the first chapter, so...
Welcome.
The Blackhawk Edition gives you special black paint, a spoiler, these side graphics, still a little weak compared to the original side graphics, honestly, and special shiny wheel covers. It's a little hard to determine what the Blackhawk Edition comes with. I'm guessing it came loaded with pretty much all the options, but they don't actually give you a full list of all the specs for it in the brochure I have. And the Blackhawk Edition is in its own brochure, it's not in the regular brochure. It does say it comes with power steering, AC, oak-colored interior, the passenger side view mirror, and a center console, and it's available in either automatic or manual. Here it does say you get all of the features and all of the style, so maybe the Blackhawk just came with everything. Were you just supposed to order these things blind? Does anyone own one of these? They do change the trims around for 1997. In fact, now there's only one trim, CE, which you can get in either 2 or 4-door. The CE is basically what the DX was and has most of the same options and option packages available to it. The 4-speed manual is gone and the 5-speed is now the standard transmission. The automatic is still an option. Inside, the Tercel gets new climate controls, but any further cosmetic updates are held off for one more year. The Hawk Edition is back for 97, now available in black, white, or red. A refresh comes for 1998, which is actually the final model year for the US. The turn signals, both front and rear, have been inverted, there's a new grille, and on the inside the gauges now have a blue background to them. Aside from the styling, I'm not sure if there's any major options or equipment changes for the US for the final model year, because I cannot get my hand on a 98 US brochure, and there's just not much info on these cars online. I do actually have a Canadian 98 brochure, but I can't really use that because many of the options are different between the markets. Canadian models, for example, did get a standard rear window defroster, and by 98 you couldn't get body-colored bumpers at all in Canada anymore. Someone watching is a Tercel expert, I'm sure, so let us know in the comments if there's any other changes they did for the final model year down there. In Canada, the Tercel would actually sell for one more year into 1999, pretty much unchanged from 98. I have to say, it seems like Toyota started going a little backwards with the Tercel in the 90s. They just kept taking more and more stuff away as the decade went on. But then again, if people were buying it for basic transportation, maybe everyone was gravitating towards the lower end models and the upper trims just weren't selling. Perhaps that's why the SR5 was cancelled back in the mid-80s. So, which Tercel is your favorite?
And 3, as homecoming queen. I just wanted to show off a little. Who could ask for anything more?
Tercel.